the Overman Warrior Podcast.
Hi, Choppin here. There are very few things in life that are better than getting, for me, than getting a new biblical archaeology review in the mail. I've been getting this publication since I was like 11 or 12 years old, and it's been a part of my entire adult life, and I just love reading about biblical archaeology. So much so that one of my favorite Bibles is this wonderful, majestic piece of work. It's the Crossway Bible that corresponds archaeology finds. I've talked about it before, but it's very relevant to the subject matter we're going to cover here now today, because we're moving in a very interesting direction. And this is a topic, probably my favorite topic to talk about. The Bible and archaeology. It has been a part of my life forever, always, and the more you learn, the more interesting it gets. And it's been a lifelong pursuit for me. And so I found JD Vance's comments extremely interesting. Recently, he did an interview and talked about what UFOs are, because all the talk is Trump administration releasing the UFO files and kind of letting it out, what full disclosure is. And, you know, the timing on that needs to be before the Spielberg film, so that Democrats, Podesta and Hillary Clinton's and all those people have wanted to do this for years. Obama's wanted to tag himself to it. And of course, when the Spielberg film comes out, it's going to be out everywhere, and everyone's going to be a come lately. So I found it very interesting that JD Vance did a very good interview recently where he talked about that very thing. And he's sort of going down the path of where Tucker Carlson had been talking. Now, Tucker Carlson's fallen off the wagon quite a lot recently. But the talk going from complete pseudoscience to all of a sudden having an opinion on what a UFO is. And they say, well, I think it's an alien. And I think there's a lot of layers to get to, or an alien, that it's a demon. Aliens are demons. I think what you're doing is you're painting that with a broad brush that's way too broad. And you have to really kind of unpack it. And I've been working on a project to kind of do that. But there's a method to get there. And I think there's some recommendations I'd like to make, particularly about this book. I think it's one of the finest, up to date. There's a lot of people have done a lot of good work along the lines of this thinking, this exploration. But we're no longer at the point where, do you believe in aliens or not? I think we're at this point now in history to say, okay, what are aliens? And JD Vance is saying, I think they're demons. I think they're some work of evil. Which there's a very fleshly component to that, and I know if he's very interested in it, of course, it's going to be revealed, and people are going to come to it in their own way. And I call them normies, who kind of live their life. They study law, they study the arts and sciences of humanity, and they stay within the lines that they give you in the coloring book. What we're talking about is kind of making your own coloring book and drawing your own lines, and then talking about the discoveries made there. And in the case of the context of what are the contents of that book, I think this book by Timothy Alberino, I was extremely impressed with. There's other folks before him, and right now there's an evolution of people who are kind of outside the box thinking what's in it. I think this is one of the best ones that I've seen in recent years, and he really gets into it because it roots it in Scripture. He roots some of the UFO speculations out of the mysticism column and puts it in biblical lore, which is a move that you have to make. And it's also the direction that logic takes it, which is why you all of a sudden have people like JD Vance talking about UFOs interactions and the relationship they've had with us as being demonic or demons. But I think Timothy Alberino flushes it out very well in this book, Birthright, and I'll get into that in a minute. But if I was going to recommend JD Vance, and there's a lot of people watching this right now who are text buddies with JD Vance, quite a few, might want to, if he's that interested in it, and he's the guy who's going to be involved in disclosure, and the Trump administration is going to get out in front of this story anyway, what's the safe bet to talk about what's in those files? Because the files are pretty stale, and I have a pretty good idea what's in them, but the confirmation is what's going to be rattling, and to put that in a context is important. And I would suggest Timothy Alberino's book, Birthright, as the foundation for how the disclosure gets put out into the public. I think, as I've said, I think this book would be a great bridge to get from where we are to disclosure. Because you have to have proper context. And in order to do that, you have to have some biblical scholarship to go with it, because this is an ancient thing. This is not a recent phenomenon of just being victims to some little green men from Mars that are, like in Mars Attacks, that are just going to destroy all civilization. That's kind of an infantile view of the depth of history. But before we get into too much of that, let's listen to JD Vance's statements, because they're really good. And I think it's very sincere. And again, this is the Trump administration. He's the representative of the Trump administration. He's also the future of MAGA. When Trump's not in office anymore, he's going to be the one. He's from my neighborhood. I've met him a few times, several times actually. Know him a little bit. And I know a whole lot of people who know him really well. And I want to recommend to them and him that this is the bridge for disclosure. I think Timothy Alberino is one of the brightest minds on this topic right now. He has a little fun with the conspiracy side, but everything's rooted in Scripture. And that's your foundation for bringing this thing forward and getting people started in the right direction. And take the crazy liberalisms out of it and root it in something that means something to people. So let's listen to JD Vance. This is good stuff.
Going to release all the UFO files.
We're working on it. It's funny, when I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files, and then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peeked? Have you done a peek?
Have I what?
Have you done a peek? I mean, like,
So I actually haven't. I have
full
not.
Independence Day.
I have. I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it, but I am going to. Trust me, I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet?
Not yet.
Some
Not
people
yet.
say they get the UFOs in Ohio.
Yeah, Hangar 18, right?
Hangar 18.
I've heard that as well. But I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay.
Where the Kandahar Giant's been kept.
We saw aliens.gov.
That's another story.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
Well, I can't let you go without that qualifying. Because Barack Obama is on this podcast, and he goes, yeah, aliens are real, but, like, here's where they're not. And,
I did not.
So Obama says, yes, aliens are, he gets asked point blank, are aliens?
Great article.
Oh, yeah. And then he goes, but they're not at Area 51. And
well, where are they?
Well, that's what he says. Okay. Right. There's a great question. Trump had to go save them, and he said he's going to declassify. Okay. So you think they're demons?
Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe everything celestial, everything as otherworldly, to describe it as aliens, I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there, and there are things that are very difficult to explain. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extra natural phenomenon, that's where I go to, is the Christian understanding that, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there. And I think that one of the devil's great tricks is to convince people we never existed.
You going to release all the UFO files?
We're working.
So there's a lot in there. And I would say, and this isn't a put down of JD Vance, he's worked hard in his young life to arrive as vice president of the United States. He's been successful in business. He's been a good Marine, good lawyer, made a movie with Ron Howard, the Hillbilly Elegy, worked on trying to save his mom from addiction issues. A lot of things there. It's exceptional. But his perspective is very much from within the box of society. So I call him a normie. I have personally no desire to be a normie. I've never been a normie. Don't want to be a normie. That's my nickname for people who really want to hold the handrails going down the stairs of normal life. And there's a lot of limits to that, but it also provides a good, stable society and a good way to raise families. And being a normie is not so bad. Cut your grass on Saturdays and Sundays. Listen to a baseball game. Cook a couple hot dogs on the grill. Talk to your neighbor about getting new blades for your lawnmower. and who has the best lawnmower? Those are normie problems. What's the price of gas? So I think JD Vance is coming at this alien discussion from a normie position. And the first thing you think of is you go to Roswell and see the crash site, which I've been there. I've seen it. I think that you find when you go to the Area 51 that's mostly test bed stuff for aerospace. I happen to be an aerospace executive, so I know a little bit about skunk works and people who do them. So I think that's mainly what you're going to find there, and it's a convenient diversion for a lot of the alien story. Gives a nice cover story for secrecy on projects that would rather not be disclosed to enemies, foreign and domestic. You have elements of the lettered agency, the three lettered agencies that want to stay in charge. So the alien stories give them access to endless black budgets, a way to not have congressional oversight. Because if you don't give it to us, the aliens are going to come kill us. We have to do work on your behalf to do Project Blue Book and all kinds of things in the background. We have to gather up the Kandahar giant from Afghanistan and put it in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and study him for a while. Found in 2005, by the way. I know about that because it's up the road from my house. And I happen to have a very good friend who is a retired colonel from there. And he's very cheeky about the studies that have gone on there over the years. And he'll say, and I never press him, but he'll say, we reverse engineered a lot of Russian craft at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that's okay. You don't have to get into it too much. You can tell by the inflection, the way people describe things to you, what's true and what's not. And it really doesn't matter because it all gets out anyway. It's all leaking out. And that's why JD Vance is talking about this now. 5 years ago, that would have been a taboo subject. No vice president would be talking about aliens. And when you did, you would come out very hokey and crazy. But not so much anymore. Now that you have, I don't think the internet went the way they thought it would, the three-lettered agencies anyway. Twitter started off as kind of a way to control population. The FBI, the CIA was all over it, embedded into it, and it was a way to manipulate personality control with the illusion of free speech controlling narrative. But now the whole script is flipped. When Trump came into the White House and started writing executive orders that decentralized the administrative state, this topic got thrown on the table because it's been looming forever and people know what they see. They've been talking about it for years. And people like Timothy Alberino, even Graham Hancock in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of folks that have been studying this thing from a unique perspective. And the thing that really roots it is biblical studies. So when I talk about my favorite magazine being Biblical Archaeology Review, I'm not kidding when I say that I look very much forward to it. It comes every quarter or so. And the articles in it are fascinating in what archaeologists, real archaeologists, find that's going on in the world, and how it corresponds to surviving text that's managed to make it to us, well, like in the Bible. And when you go through all the actual finds that are listed voluminously in a book like this is the archaeology version of the Crossway Bible, the New Standard Version, the English Standard Version. And there's tons of articles of actual, and I have a lot of books on archaeology, especially biblical archaeology that spawn off this even, but this is such a wonderful collection. And if you was to say, well, what's the totality of it? I would say there's a lot of paranormal recordings in here that are corresponded by physical hard evidence, not just of lifestyles lived, but belief systems that cascade through time, and this interaction they have with Yahweh's relationship with people and with competing deities and what those deities are. So when JD Vance says, I think they're demons, I think you have an open understanding that we throw all evil into the category of demons and say evil equals demons, and demons are flying around these craft we don't understand, and they're spiritual entities using multiple dimensional mechanisms to interact with us in some frightening way. And I think what Timothy Alberino does is get into the details of it, and we talk about, he does, and I believe very similar to him on a lot of these things. And he talks a lot about transhumanism, which I probably have a different view on what it is. And yes, we're being overthrown. Yes, there's rebels against God that are trying to topple the birthright, which is why this is called that, of Adam and all the descendants of Adam, the intentions God had for the Garden of Eden. Representation of God himself, heaven on earth, which was Eden. And we have a right to that. And we're squandering away. We've been lured and tempted, seduced off the mark. And there's a great argument made in here about the presence of these are physical creatures that came and mated with human females and tossed away the reverence to God and conspired against God's creation in ways that were abysmal. And we're still seeing it chronicle out today. Now, along with that, you also have the punishment that God inflicted on these offspring of these Nephilim that were rebels from God, that then had offspring that became very giant creatures that we find all over the world. Especially, I live in the Ohio River Valley. I've done a lot of coverage on giants that were found and chronicled, and I think there's a lot of people that have done wonderful work. Fritz Zimmerman comes to my mind, but there's a whole host of people who have done serious work in chronicling all the newspaper reportings and piecing together this conspiracy that exists out there. Same conspiracy that told us aliens didn't exist. There's this probably a more sinister conspiracy against this giant race. And why is that? So the prevailing theory that comes down with, you go back and read the book of Enoch, and Timothy Alberino is involved in another version of the book of Enoch that is, I would say, a pinnacle work of academia. Because it doesn't come from the perspective of the academics. Like my people I admire a lot in Biblical Archaeology Review, this is a very academic report of archaeology around the Near East, essentially. They correspond with biblical interests. But the academic vantage point lacks the imagination to behold something that's outside our physical understanding. So like when I call JD Vance a normie, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. He's raising his kids. He's a good husband. He's vice president of the United States. He goes to work every day, listens to Trump, gets assignments to do things. And right now the assignment is, hey, we promise we're going to do this. We're going to unleash these UFO files, create a website. Let's get it over there. Let's start creating a mechanism, get this thing out. And for political reasons, you got to beat the Spielberg film. Because otherwise, it's coming out regardless. There's so many stories that are leaking that it's out there. You're not going to put it in. You're not going to put this back in the bottle. It's coming out. A conspiracy deeper than that is this giant race that came from these Nephilim that was chronicled in the Book of Enoch, which Timothy Alberino was a part of. I recommend highly reading that. It's really good. And then this sets up that, though. His book Birthright really lays the argument out, and I think it's the best bridge to disclosure that's out there now, because I love them all. I've read some wild books on UFO thoughts. I've seen a lot of speculation. I love all the ancient alien shows. I know I have some very good friends, and I don't think he'd mind me saying it. One of my very best friends, Senator George Lang, and I. People say, "Why do you like him so much? He's a mainstreamer, a politician." You know what? And that's true. He's a mainstream politician. Gets a lot of things done. Does a lot of good jobs. Does a lot of good work in Ohio. But you know what? We spent most of our 20-some, more than 20 years of friendship talking about? Ancient aliens. Old sites. I was with him at lunch one day back when everybody started catching on. I think that was known for a while, but it became mainstream that the Easter Island statues actually had long bodies buried deep under the soil, many feet, 10 feet deep. They had legs. They weren't just heads sitting on the side of the mountain, in the hillside on the mountain. They actually have very tall bodies. And who built them and who put them there? And I was with George when that story broke, because we were talking about it at lunch together. And even though we talk a lot about politics over the years, our best shared moments have been about the speculative thoughts that's dug in the ground and wonder where it came from. And that so much of that has been done, and now there's so much freedom of press, in books that would have never been published before are now published. And this one did really well. This came out in 2020. This is a fantastically well put together book, and it's part of kind of a new age of publishing, where you're not stuck to like the big 4 or 5 in New York that publish everything, or a few big publishers in London who carried everything, or Paris. And you had to cater all your material to their sentiments, and their sentiments were controlled by big finance and kind of global interests, and you had to really dial back something if you wanted to get it in there, which is how this conspiracy of the giants has been managed to stay under wraps for so long, and the conspiracy of the aliens. And what are the aliens? And the progression of thought has now brought us to the doorstep of having serious discussions about it and tying it to scripture. And so the secular view of the world really doesn't like this. And if you really can take the UFO interactions and tie them to the Bible, which everybody can relate to, and Bible sales are skyrocketing because people are starting to put it together. They're looking for good foundations. We're not just talking about church on Sundays. There's a lot of wonderful messaging in the Bible that has survived miraculously through time. And then when you correspond it with real archaeology, Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, but even much more than that, and the Book of Enoch was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so that you can validate and correspond them to just texts that survive through history. That's an amazing feat. And when you can see the wisdom that's been transpired over time, there's a lot of paranormal activity in the Bible. Not just miracles of God or Jesus healing and providing miracles himself to validate that he's the Messiah. We're talking about paranormal relationships, and you want to understand what those are, because they didn't just go away. We just got busy and stopped paying attention, because the world now, all that paranormal activity is disguising itself behind polite society, where normies don't see it because they flip the TV on. They're looking for their sports score, their favorite baseball team. They're cooking hot dogs on the grill. They're talking about cutting their grass and doing their work so they can pay their mortgage. And then by that time, your bandwidth is occupied. There's not much else, room for much else. And you go to bed tired because you worked a hard day and you took care of your family, and you know what the score was to your favorite sports team. You're not thinking about aliens, and you're not thinking about ancient history and what survived in the book of Enoch and how relevant it might be to the future of all civilization. But Timothy Alberino in Birthright explores that very topic, and I've read it several times now, and I can say I think he brings another layer to that demon statement. I think that Tucker Carlson started. I think JD Vance sort of said, I'm interested in these things, and Tucker can go there. I think I'm comfortable going there. I wonder about these things. I'm from Ohio, right? Patterson Air Force Base was up the road from where I grew up, and you hear, everybody knows the secrecy that goes on around the base, always has. That the Roswell aliens were taken there, supposedly. A lot of evidence says they were. Again, I know people that were stationed there, so I feel very comfortable to say that was the case. And I feel very comfortable saying that they found a giant, a large human being in Afghanistan. They took the body to study at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that's still a place where a lot of this research gets done, right on the open. And again, it's up the road from my house. There's a lot of UFO activity still to this day. I talk about paranormal occurrences. I talked about the Bigfoot sightings in Ohio recently. And to me, it's all one big same story. That if you start understanding things from a biblical context, it makes a lot more sense. And when you start thinking about the slaughtered by Yahweh giants that were destroyed in the flood, the offspring of the Nephilim, the fallen angels that conspired against God, and God was so furious with this conspiracy that he flooded the earth with some sort of terrible tragedy that brought great devastation. Some elements of those giants likely survived because they were written about all over the Bible. You go into the Bible, there's a lot of giants in the Bible, including this famous story of Goliath, David and Goliath. But there's families of giants. And then when you start looking at the hard science of really passionate people like Fritz Zimmerman that have gone all over Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and studied all the multitude of mounds, and you connect those back to the Amorites of Stonehenge because of the math and how it all lays out. The evidence is pointing back to the claims, and this is why Timothy Alberino is able to write a book like this, because there's enough discussion on some of these podcasts that are advancing the ball so we can actually discuss it outside of Sunday school. This is now a daily topic. We're getting off the coast to coast. Are there aliens, or are they going to abduct us, and are they going to hollow out our cattle and leave the carcasses bloodless in the middle of pasture somewhere? What's a crop circle? The conversations are along those lines. Bigfoot, are Bigfoot real? Are they some primordial ape? Are they some kind of interdimensional character? When you start getting in the book of Enoch and breaking it down and going where Timothy Alberino goes in Birthright, you kind of understand what the real battle that's always been going on truly is. So when JD Vance says, I think aliens are demons, I think he's coming from a perspective of someone who's new to the topic, might be fascinated by it, and I think he's sincerely interested. I think this is really, the Trump administration is like, hey, we're going to release this stuff. JD Vance, you're the vice president. You take this. I'm going to go deal with the Iran, bring gas prices down, and take care of Venezuela, China, the economy, the hostile agents of all that we've seen coming out of the World Economic Forum. You deal with the aliens. And I think he now has a task that he can align himself to. And he's looking for a bridge to get there. And my suggestion to him and to people who watch me every day and read all my stuff, and we all have mutual friends, I would say, because he did this great interview, and now that requires the next step, the most trusted place you could go to get further information would be this guy. He's got the hot hand right now. He's very articulate, and this book, I think, lays the perfect foundation for the bridge to get to disclosure in the short time. Again, I'm working on a number of projects. I think if we're looking at this as steps of knowledge, we're climbing those steps, and every step's important. You got to have these guys doing these great publications. Got to have people who dig and bring back information that they report in this fantastic magazine, periodical, that I just adore. And I will likely, I think this article in here about the Tower of Babel is something that I'm going to do something with. Very important. You got to have these guys. Then you got to collect it over many, many years, thousands of years in some cases, and do a book like this and study it word for word. And all that information and all these people have worked so hard to bring, put it in here, and then see what it tells you. And then you have to have people who are very passionate about the topic, like Fritz Zimmerman. And I really like this guy, Timothy Alberino. And he's been good. He's brought a little Indiana Jones to the biblical scholarship of true ancient history that is in the deep past, that has very much the relevancy of today and how you define evil and what kind of plot is unfolding, for which we might say it's evil spirits running around causing all kinds of trouble. But where did they come from? And are they aliens? Are they demons? Are they both? Are they a combination of things? And I think you find that you have a whole population of species, a whole population of aliens who have interacted with the earth for a very long time and been a part of our culture, shaped it, manipulated it, just tried to destroy it. And they didn't all have the same agenda. And then you have elements of the paranormal that were certainly part of the biblical narrative. You have a direct relationship where God came down and spoke to chosen people and had a real interaction with them. And God was either disappointed or helped accelerate their knowledge. Enoch was just such a character, not found in the Bible, but found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, along with all the other texts of the Bible. And Timothy Alberino has done a lot of great work to bring that to the forefront and connect the deep past to our current relevancy. And all that adds up to Vice President of the United States and the President of the United States preparing to have disclosure of information that I would say I've been talking about for a very long time. Timothy Alberino certainly has, along with a whole host of other people. And I keep saying that because there's so many that are part of it. That Hugh Newman, for instance, that have been trying to piece this puzzle together, and they've managed to get enough of the pieces of the puzzle put together where you can at least get the edges. And now we're filling in the middle of the puzzle, and that visibility what the puzzle is coming quite clear. And as it's coming clear, you have speculation from popular media people like Tucker Carlson that doesn't have a lot of relevance to me anymore because I guess he's fallen off the wagon. And sometimes when you fly, you lose your tethered roots, you can burn apart. Happens to a lot of people. But I think JD Vance, he's a good guy. Again, I've met him lots of times, actually, the more I think about it. Don't always think about it that much, but every time, he's a really nice guy, and he's really good, and he really wants to be a good family person, and he's the real deal as far as all that goes. He's sincere in everything he does, but he's a normie. He's a normal person, and he comes from that normal perspective. And most people are normal. That's why they call it normal. But the normies are becoming more interested in the exceptional information that's been on the fringes outside the box, because that's where the answers are. The answers were never inside the box that our institutions put us in and said, here, look at this, and this is all you get. The answers have been outside the box, and they come to us through adventurers, through archaeologists that have done the hard digging, anthropologists, scientists, paleontologists, geologists that have been piecing this stuff together for years, and you get creative people who aren't afraid to go outside that box to go see what it means. And Timothy Alberino, in the modern context, in 2020, put this Birthright book out, and it's very relevant here in 2026. And I would highly recommend everybody go get it. And I think if you do read it, you're going to have a bridge to understand the impact of disclosure that's happening. Not an if, it's happening. And I think it's happening sooner than later, because politically, if it's going to happen anyway, Trump administration needs to be the one to do it. You got to beat the Spielberg film. And I put the relevance on the Spielberg film because I remember I was alive. I went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind at the drive-in. And that was the year Star Wars came out. So I remember 3 big movies came out that year. I think there were more than that, actually. But really big, powerful movies that shaped culture in the late 70s. Smokey and the Bandit, Star Wars, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I remember seeing Close Encounters. And I remember going to the store and seeing all this, all of a sudden, all this UFO stuff that was out there. I did a report in 4th grade about UFOs, the sightings, what we knew at the time. So all that interest was launched because Close Encounters of the Third Kind made it okay to talk about it. Just recently, I took my family to Devil's Tower out in Wyoming because Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Devil's Tower is a very mysterious place, and I wanted to see it in real life, not just how it was represented in the movie Close Encounters. But I remember being a kid when Close Encounters came out and the impact it had on society and how much dialogue was driven by that one film. And then I remember E.T. a few years later. I think it was 1982. And E.T. the Extraterrestrial, another Spielberg film, made it okay to talk about aliens. Because now the alien was cute. It was there, came to make friends with a young boy. And as a human race, we got our minds wrapped around this idea. So Steven Spielberg has had curiosity about these things, I think much the way JD Vance has. He's had a tool to go tell the story or ask the questions. And now he's made another movie called Disclosure. It's coming out in June of 2026. So here we are coming into April 2026. And JD Vance is talking about, he thinks the UFOs have demons in them. So that's a normie perspective. If you want to flush it out and understand the depth, this is your book. Birthright, Timothy Alberino. And I would say, I would put on the category of fantastic. Because as we talk, I get a lot of people that don't like the fact that I talk about going to space so much. I want to get to Mars. I want to see archaeology on Mars where you haven't had layers and layers of civilization. Because I would say I'm 100% sure that there was life on Mars that came to Earth and settled the world. And they got wrapped up in our mythology. And I don't think it was just Mars. I think there are other life forms on other planets that have been migrating around the solar system forever. And we have a little bit of all of them in us, either in culture or genetics. Now, that sounds crazy. That's outside the box talk. It's definitely not normie considerations. That's definitely not something you talk about while listening to the ball game in the backyard, cooking hot dogs on the grill, talking to your neighbor. They're going to think you're really crazy. They're going to want to hear what the sports scores are, what the batting averages are, the top players. They don't want to hear about aliens coming to Earth in some ancient time and settling civilization. And that a lot of the mathematics that were found in our monuments are also found on the surface of Mars by things we've observed. So one thing you don't have on Earth, one thing that you don't have on Earth is a blank slate. On Mars, you have no civilization. We have built all these corresponding civilizations on top of the previous monuments, covering up the ancient history. And what is left to us is what survived in books like the Bible and books like the Book of Enoch that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves. And they come to us from the ancient past to verify what people thought and why they thought it at the time. And then when you correspond that by digging and actually getting into the depths of the ground and verifying what is written in biblical text, now you're cooking with gas. And so going to space is the way to go to a blank slate, get to the moon, get onto Mars, do some archaeology. I want to subscribe not to just biblical. I will always subscribe to biblical archaeology as long as it exists. But I want to have Mars archaeology quarterly. I want to have moon archaeology quarterly. I want to have moons of Jupiter archaeology. I want to see these things because we're going to find out a lot of what's been communicated to us through mythology that survived ancient biblical texts and the adventurers who dare ask the questions when it wasn't popular. And now it's popular. Now the vice president's talking about it, and it's been a lot of mainstream people have been talking about it. Megyn Kelly's been talking about it. Everybody's starting to get jiggy with it, and their assumption, essentially, since Tucker said it, which is he thinks they're demons, I think they're spinning around the rim of their journalist mainstream cook the hot dogs in the backyard mindset. The safe zone, holding the handrails, that's how they can relate to something that's unknown to them. But the bridge to get to disclosure, I would say it's this book. So I'm spending a little time on this because I think it's excessively important, and I would highly recommend that a lot of my friends who are watching this let the vice president know if he's curious and really wants to know the answers, I would point him in this direction. And this is a way to get disclosure moving in the right direction. And Timothy Alberino, I would say, is your best resident expert on that topic presently. So, it's exciting. It's a world full of adventure for those who dare seek it. And more people now are coming out of that box and looking out to where the adventure is. And now we're getting reports from those who have been out there digging in the dirt. Real archaeology, real scholarship, real analysis of Dead Sea Scrolls, Book of Enoch, the political contemplations of why it didn't make the cut and end up in the original biblical canon. And other books like the Book of Giants, which I think is another one, just like I said, the Tower of Babel. So I'm working on my own stuff to kind of take this stair step and build a bridge to get where humanity needs to get. I think the Book of Giants is a significant work of art that comes to us from ancient history, and I tend to think of it as being pre-Babylonian civilization. I think there's a lot of truth said. I think Timothy Alberino said it in this book. But I totally agree with it. I've been thinking it for a long time, that maybe it's not the Tigris-Euphrates Valley that secular society analyzed through convenience, considered that it was the root of civilization and that Indus Valley was the oldest that there was. I tend to think that the Near East, the corridor along Mount Hermon, along the Mediterranean, that goes all the way down to what was there before Jerusalem was there, the Dome of the Rock, where it is now. That particular point at top Mount Moriah was important to Yahweh for a reason. And I think David Flynn, in his wonderful work, Temple at the Center of Time, which Timothy Alberino is a fan of, I think he's found a way that Isaac Newton nailed down a lot of math that reveals what's buried under 20, 30 feet of soil that is covering up a lot of these sites. Just like Göbekli Tepe has been covered up. And we have sites all over the world. There's sites off the coasts of most of the continents that are ancient. We're corresponding. I always talk about the Wendover people in Florida 8,000 years ago. We're starting to get into the very deep roots of civilization. We're breaking down our previous assumptions. And as all that comes loose, and institutionalism has shown itself to fail to acknowledge what was always out there, it's the adventurers who have brought that great daring information from outside the box into the box. And now you have JD Vance thinking about it, talking about it, and open dialogues that would have never made the cut in a 60 Minutes interview 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. It would have been laughed at by everybody, but no one's laughing anymore because the truth is coming. And it's I think a lot of people already know it. A lot of people have had a sneak peek, and the realization that we certainly have not been alone, because that was always the tagline for Close Encounters. Are we alone? And you had the lost highway that disappeared into a big mothership rising or descending behind Devil's Tower. I was so obsessed with that movie all my life that I took a pilgrimage with my entire family, son-in-laws and grandkids and everybody, to take them to the Devil's Tower to see the real thing. Because there are a lot of people who still think that Devil's Tower is a giant tree that is the stump of an ancient giant civilization that roamed the earth. And of course, a lot of geologists will laugh at you and giggle at the assumption of it. It's a very strange, column of lava in the way it presented itself. But you're looking at massive amounts of erosion just to make what it is. The world has changed tremendously over a long period of time, and there's been a human presence there. There's been a life form, likely various species of alien, that has interacted here for many, many years. And I'll leave you with one last thing before we go too far off of it. If you go to Serpent Mound, and this is another thing, along with the Tower of Babel that I've been talking about, and the Book of Giants, that I think is epically important. I don't hear enough people talk about, and I don't, it's not like it's super secret. I just don't hear many people talking about it. I'm going to do something with it. The reason that Serpent Mound was placed where it was, when you had a crypto explosion many tens of millions of years in the past. A crypto explosion meaning a mysterious force from outside Earth struck it. It's an impact crater of some kind. And all the random places on Earth that they could have built the Serpent Mound that has all these alignments to all these stars and very complicated math that we're just getting to know. It's quite an extraordinary sight. And if you go there now, it's in a state of disrepair. I mean, it's one of the most relevant sites on Earth, and you'd think that in the state of Ohio we would take better care of it and really prep it up. It should be as significant as the kind of effort that English Heritage has done at the Stonehenge site. You should have every bit of the same kind of attention on it, because it is every bit as interesting as Stonehenge. But they built the site on the edge of a crypto explosion crater that no way anybody alive at 1000 BC or 100 BC or 5000 BC, whatever the argument is about Serpent Mound, there's no way they could have known, unless they had supernatural interaction of some kind, about where to place Serpent Mound, why it's relevant. Which then points back to the whole Newton theory that that David Flynn was tapping into with where civilization has built itself, the London Stone, where London was built, where it was built, where Paris was built, where some of the major cities of our society, of the human race, were erected. Why put a Temple of Solomon on that spot? What was so important about that spot that God was so interested in? And why were there likely previous sacrifices at that high place to all kinds of gods that Yahweh wanted to declare, plant a flag in it and say, this is my land now, I'm kicking you guys out of here. The relevance of the ancient past is what we're digging into and trying to understand. And the best way to do it isn't just to say that they're demons. That doesn't explain the whole story. It just says we see something today and we don't know what it means. We think it's evil and we associate evil with demons. The layers are much deeper and require a lot more effort to get your mind around. And the best arguments, there's a lot of arguments out there and there's a lot of perspectives, and Timothy Alberino can't possibly get them all in one book. But one of the best arguments I've seen right now for bridging to disclosure is this book, Birthright. I'd recommend it to anybody and everybody, really, if you're interested in disclosure, should read this. And I would recommend that anybody who can get a word to JD Vance, so he can have a next layer of discussion on this, because he's obviously interested in it, and it's part of the story of his campaign for presidency. Timothy Alberino's book, Birthright, is a great place to build a case for disclosure. Not to mention the political implications of being the one who was responsible for disclosure, and how many people are going to be eternally grateful, and even people on the left will vote for him because they've been wanting this forever. He will gain an instant following of people who have been in the box, who cook their hot dogs on the back porch, with the grill, with the Reds game or the baseball game on, and talk about mowing grass. They're going to vote for him because they want their taxes lowered and they want a continuation of the Trump administration. But there are a lot of people who are not interested in politics. There are a lot of people who are moderates. There are a lot of people who are on the left who want disclosure. And the Trump administration needs to be the one to give it to them, which I'm sure they have the plan. And JD Vance, if you want to have a platform to be the president, I can't think of a better way to build than to make disclosure real for people and take it out of the realm of conspiracy and skepticism and high drama, and bring it into the realm of understanding and tie it to wonderful biblical knowledge. And everybody will then go and read their Bibles much more carefully, and we'll give everybody a relationship that will make their lives much, much better. Can't emphasize that enough. I've shared a lot here because I think very passionately about this topic. Again, I read the Biblical Archaeology Review religiously. Every time I get a new edition of it, I pretty much freeze my time. Not many things I do like that, where I'll take 3 or 4 hours and just go through it. And it's some of the most joy 3 or 4 hours that I ever have. And it's, if you're not interested in these things, it could be stale academic reading about dig sites and how they correspond. But if you've studied the Bible and you've read the Bible, a lot of times, 5 to 10 times, or if you read the Bible and had a relationship with it, lots of times over many decades, and you know it well enough to then read these academic periodicals about digs that correspond with what you're getting, then you can verify the text. Well, then it opens the door for a whole lot broader discussion. And then you have to answer the questions about what you don't find in the dirt, which is the paranormal, supernatural stuff. And for that, if you validate what you can validate with hard archaeology, and then you apply the same logic to what survives in text and scripture, and then you analyze it for what it says, as the book of Enoch does, you get some wonderful translations that end up in books like this. So I would recommend Timothy Alberino's Birthright, The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse, and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on planet Earth. Really good book. So I would recommend getting it, and anybody who can let JD Vance know that I think that's his ticket to understanding these things to the next level. I think he'll love it. He'll really enjoy it. Anyway, if you're chopping here, share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you ever read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. And again, Birthright by Timothy Alberino. I think it's going to be, I'd recommend getting it today, reading it several times over the next couple months. And when the disclosure comes out, you'll be much better prepared for what's coming. Much better, intellectually. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
Thank you for listening.